morning, Port Jervis, and welcome to the Port Connects Spotlight Podcast. It is a Port Pride Friday. It is the Erie Bell Game Friday, the day before the Bell Game. Bell Game tomorrow at noon at refurbished historic Lynette Field. But this morning, very special morning, very, very proud, very happy this morning. My good friend, Ms. Valentin, good to see you. Good to see you.
Thank you,
My
Andrew.
good friend, Ilene Valentin, the longtime beloved, historic teacher here in Port Jervis Schools, middle school and high school.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yeah.
Good morning.
We've had a pregame here. We went over the show.
We have.
Showed you my lesson plan.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lesson plan and got me my bullets so I stay focused. Okay.
We can't use that word in school here, Ms. Valentin. We don't use that word anymore.
All right. Good
kidding.
to know.
Yeah. Well, good morning, friends. And a delight to be on. Please jump in the show. Ilene Valentin, so many friends, so many students, so many former teachers, colleagues that want to say hello, and so many places we can take the show. There's so much.
Yes.
You know.
Thank you.
But let's start with you in joining Port Jervis Schools. You deciding to come to Port, starting in our middle school, special education. Let's start with the teaching, Ilene. That's always been first and foremost with you and the kids.
Yes. So I came in 1982. I spent my first year at ASK, which is now the middle school. I spent a year there, and then they began a program at the middle school for special education students. And I was asked to go there, and then I spent 13 years there. And the last principal I had there, Jack Latini, who is very dear to me, gave me a call over the summer and said one of my dear friends, Sharon, was leaving at the high school, and would I come over? He said, I feel this is going to be a good fit for you. And I said, no, I can't leave the middle school. They're like my family. I just had 2 tables of people at my wedding, and this is my second family. And he said these words, and he said, I think you should come. It'll be your destiny. It'll be my destiny. And I go, well, let me think about it. And I got off the phone. I spoke to my husband, George, and George, in his wisdom, said to me, well, how do you feel about it? I said, well, I'm interested. He goes, why? I said, and I was honest with him. He was my husband. I said, because I don't know. I feel like I'd like to move on and see where these kids go to the high school. So I did that. I came to the high school and spent 25 years there. And it was wonderful.
Your third family.
My third.
She's got a lot of families.
It just really, I got to see some of the students I had at the middle school go on. And that meant a great deal to me. And the idea of retiring from there just was really difficult, so, but in between that, we have all those wonderful years. So
many wonderful years, many wonderful stories, students. Ashley Brown says it best here. She's the best ever, and she wasn't even my teacher.
Thank you.
Just the connections. Ilene, what was it about the kids? You loved your colleagues, they loved you, but the kids, you always just poured so much into the kids.
Well, I have to tell you, at the time I was teaching and meeting them and doing it, it just was, it was in my nature, I guess. Only I grew up in the most loving, huge family. My parents, I had a very connected family and still do today. But
Pine Bush schools, right?
I went to Pine Bush schools, and I was given an opportunity to work with some special ed students my senior year, and that got me interested in special ed. But I think I had a professor. I'm glad you mentioned college and and his name was Dr. David, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, I don't know where you're going, what kind of district you'll be in, and where you'll end up. but always learn something about your students that has nothing to do with what you're teaching. Look at them and meet them, kind of that phrase they have now, meet you where you are. Well, he actually said that. He said, you're meeting them for the first time. They're not just going to be a name in your grade book. They're coming from homes and families and have their own feelings. And so I always try to do that. And another thing he said, stand at the door. Don't be sitting at your desk. If you can, remember, as I got older, it was sometimes funny. I go, oh God, the bell's going to ring. But I stood at the door and I greeted them. And I'm going to be very honest. It wasn't always a connection right away. Every year, my husband would say, all right, who's on the list? And the list was, he goes, you know what? We started to see by Thanksgiving, I was sort of starting to get a groove going there. There was something. And a lot of that, Andrew, had to do with not always dealing with a situation at the moment. Trying to remember that I got how many other kids in there. It was for the greater good. Sometimes kids just want to be heard. You just say the two words. I understand. They're yelling. They're not happy about something. And you just look at them and go, I understand. And you try and move on with what you're trying to teach. So I cannot say this enough. They gave me more, I feel, than I gave them, because I was able to integrate the joy I felt I felt a lot of pride in what I did. And I integrated that into my own family.
Yeah. You really blended your love outside of school into school.
Yeah.
When we look at this picture, Ms. Valentin, this is just one example of a picture that was in your office, hundreds and hundreds of kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the kid, you know the story, you know their families, you know their hopes, you know their dreams, you know their failures and their fears. So many stories, including this week, you taking Corey Taylor to the hospital for another procedure. I mean, it would go on and on. The amount of
there's a young lady in the bottom left there, Michaela Terwilliger, is now working at the Galleria AMC Theaters as a manager. And
I get you some tickets. Can you get some tickets? Can we get her some tickets?
Well, the thing is, when she friended me on Facebook, and then I sent her that picture that I have in my home. That's a smaller version, sits on my refrigerator with my children, my grandchildren, and everyone else, my husband and I, that I love. And so that reminds me of that part of my life. And, that's why entering retirement at first was a bit difficult. It was.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Corey Taylor. Corey's been a part of our family for now 20 years. Never expected I'd still be with Corey and be part of that, the privilege of knowing Corey. So yes, the fact that it's gone on that long, it means a great deal to me, because I know without it, I would miss that. So
I love how you always pause, like during the day was busy. You'd say, no, Mr. Murata, you need to hear this about Jimmy. You need to hear this about Mike. You need to know this. You would invite me in, and you certainly would invite me in when there was birthday cake, which seemed to be almost every day. I've never seen so many birthdays in my life. But would you, if there was if you had 1,000 students, be real with the number. I mean, was it 900 cakes, 800 cakes?
Well, it's interesting. I know. Thank you for that. But I first have to give credit. I know some of my family's watching. These are not from scratch. Thank you, Duncan Hines. I only use Duncan Hines yellow cake mix, a nice bundt pan, had to replace it a little bit, the frosting, the eggs. We're talking 10 minutes, whatever, done. It all started it was when I came to the high school, we happened to be talking about, it was the month of my birthday, October. I said, anybody else born? I always like to know if someone born on my birthday. It's a coincidence. And this boy, and I guess he was like 15 at the time, he goes, yeah, my birthday was last week, but we don't celebrate anymore. I go, what do you mean you don't celebrate? You don't have a cake? And it was very odd to me. And food was a big thing in growing up, and it still is in my family. I go, what do you mean you don't have a cake? And he said, no, once you hit the teens, like 13, we don't do cakes anymore. I go, you don't do cakes? I go, in my family, my daughter Yvette, she's got this huge Halloween finger. And if it's 3 birthdays that month, we all blow out and the finger keeps rotating. And so I said, I went home, and that Friday I brought in a cake. I will tell you, though, the technique of having, say, 18, 20 kids in your class, when I did like mainstream and I had to slice it, it became an art. It did, you know, and I'd try and get you to come
Everybody
up.
gets a piece.
I'd always invite you, or it was Tony DeMarco would come up, and yeah, and I'd ask them their favorite color for icing, but please don't think I was doing all that from scratch. It was, and I don't know, and I think it kind of took off on its own. So they would have to write their name on my blotter, I love that word, blotter. We don't have that anymore. The calendar, they would have to write it, and then I would see how many there were, and I would kind of break it up. So maybe 2 cakes, 3 cakes a month, but everybody.
It was more than that. It was more than
yeah,
that.
I think it was.
You had your little travel case. You had your little thing.
Well, at one time, I'm making them, and I don't know what, my husband came in and he goes, you know, I don't get a cake just for being here. I'm putting up with more than anybody. And he said that. He goes, come on, why don't you get me going with a cake? So in my family, I'm known for my pistachio cake. I bring it for years now to every holiday, every birthday. I think they don't trust me to make anything else at this point. So yeah. So thank you.
Ilene Valentin, friends, please jump in the chat if you're watching. Nola and March, thank you tuning in.
My grandpuppies.
Ilene, you again mentioned family. You've mentioned George multiple times here. Again, it's so much to talk about, but you have your Port Jervis family, your middle school, the high school, your colleagues. You are beloved and trusted with your colleagues.
Thank you.
But your family was always first. Your mom, your dad, the stories, your husband, your son Stephen, your blended family.
Yes.
A Jewish background, married into a Puerto Rican family.
Yep.
You talk about blending of culture and ethnicities, and acceptance and love and warmth and music and food. So much with your family. Talk to me about your family and what they mean to you.
Well, we are a blended family, and when I met George, I had Stephen, and then I went on to love his children, you know, George, Yvette, Joey, Jessica. I must tell you that it just, we got a family as well, and they got my family, my parents, but it really, I will share one thing that defines it all. So my husband and I, when we got married, we were going on a cruise out of Florida, and we were staying in a hotel the night before. I find out he's afraid of heights, and we're way up. And I say, look at this view, and you could see the port. And he's like, I'm not going out there, Ilene. It was like to me, he was so strong and big, and he was my everything. And I'm like, you're afraid of heights? I never knew. So he comes out, and he's standing there, you know, reluctantly. And then he took my hands and he looked at me and said, you know, I think this is bigger than you and I. I'll never forget the way he said it. It was so sincere. I go, George, what are you talking about? He goes, this is bigger than you and I. And how those words resonate with me, because it is bigger than you and I. And I think I could say that about the relationship that I've had with my children, my grandchildren, I have great grandchildren, and all the friends we've had. And he was right. It was about us blending, but how that was going to go into other people's lives. And that's how I feel about my students. Like, I do feel that in a way, I hope that I said something or did something, or even if they watch me with someone else, I think that's what, if anything would mean something to me, that's what it would be. And I have one student I remember, he could not afford a tuxedo. So I quietly went downtown with him here in Port Jervis and rented the tuxedo. And I remember my husband lent him a pair of shoes. And I think that meant something. And we were leaving the store with the tuxedo, and he said, "I can't thank you enough." I go, you know how you can thank me? One day you might run into someone who needs something. No, I didn't make up that gift of giving to another person. That was modeled to me by my parents and my grandparents. And my father always said, when you do a good deed, no one else has to see it. It's just you do it from your heart. And that, I felt one with me every day. I feel what George said every day. And yeah, I'm very blessed.
Your parents, your mother, I got to meet your mom.
Yes, you did.
So many stories about your mom and the lessons she taught you. And you were a mother figure here with our kids. The lessons were about science. The lessons were about content. But really, the true lessons were about being a good person and being, someone who loves other people.
Well, yes, and it was more, you mentioned, about my family. I do want to say that I got the advice of one of my professors also in college, someone else, Sister Joan. Let's hear it for Sister Joan Bierstow. She said, do your work at school, do your grading, do all of that. So when you walk in, you're the mom, or you're a wife, or you're a friend. And it was interesting because one day I'm having a conversation, I don't know, with my son Stephen, and he's like, "Mom, I never saw you grading papers." The only time I think I ever brought things home is when, my favorite time of year, annual review with the IEPs. And I'd lock myself in the other room and I go, "Don't bother me." I had to focus. And yes, so I think they were, of course, foremost and present in my mind. But yes, it absolutely. But the generosity and the kindness that people showed me over the years, Port Jervis was and will remain the high school, the middle school, but the high school, I went through a lot during those times. I lost my parents. My husband became ill. And to this day, I went to the retirement breakfast on this September 2nd. And when I got to the parking lot, I couldn't get out of the car. I was crying.
Ugh.
So I called my friend Roseanne Hubbard, my dear friend, and her husband Bill Hubbard. Many of you may have had him as a student, he was your teacher. And I said to Roseanne, I can't, every time I drive in there, and I'm not crying because I'm sad, I'm crying out of gratitude. I never drove in that parking lot afraid or alone. And there were days I'd go over that mountain. I came from Middletown, and I'd be like, I don't know, how am I going to do this? So sometimes it was really hard. I'd stand up in front of my students, and they'd sense it. They go, "What's going on?" And they would feel it, and they'd know I was off. Or I'd just walk in and go, "Look, I had a rough morning. I had a rough night. I might have been maybe with my husband at the hospital or something." And the generosity, I mean, it was like kids would, I didn't bring it with me, but you brought something to the hospital when George was ill. It was a banner, And the kids and the teachers signed it to my husband, and they came, and that came, and that just was really something.
Yeah.
It
Well, you were
was.
really something with us all these years. Again, such a blended family, as you said. Like, we got to know your family, your students got to know your family, and it was in the great way. Ilene, in addition to all the love and all of these wonderful things you did for the kids, you were a great teacher, though. What were some of the strategies after the love, after the hugs? What were some of the strategies in the classroom that you got to connect with them? Because you weren't just hugging and smiling and joking with them the whole time.
No.
You taught them, and they needed you. They needed a great teacher. Tell me some of those teaching strategies.
So I think some of it was that I would walk in the room, and every year, I think from the year I came to the high school, I said to them, okay, I have a job here. You don't have a job. And they'd look at me like, what do you mean we don't have a job? Everyone's been telling me, work harder. You don't work hard enough. We're talking about, whether it was in my smaller group or in a mainstream setting, I had kids, and I'd say, no, my job is to teach you. Your job is not yet to learn till I figure out my job. So I had to figure out, how am I going to figure out how they learn? And everyone, Andrew, learns differently. So I always use the example of driving a car. Some people hold the steering wheel at 9 and 3. Some are 10 and 2. My husband with the one hand drove me crazy. But that's, I think, what it was. And I liked it. And I had to teach then we went for no longer having the cushion of an RCT for science. It went from biology to living environment. I had to teach the Regents level to students that had IEPs, some with learning disabilities, some just with simple, we started to see some autism or Asperger's. And I really I think they felt overwhelmed. So I had to think of different ways. And besides using, the technology came in, and I held on to things that really worked. And one of them, you happened to come into my room, was the overhead projector. And your reaction was very genuine. And my students called it the dinosaur. And it was a big group. I was co-teaching with Mark Trotta. Praise to Mark Trotta. And you walk in, and you're there, and you call me V, and you go, V, what's the thing there? And I go, the overhead projector. And the kids yell out, it's a dinosaur. And they had glued a dinosaur to the top of it. And you go, why are you still using it? And I said, well, because it works. And you go, but what about the smart board? And, and the kids were like, yeah, that's good. But I said, well, not to be rude, but when that thing, excuse my, hits the crapper and we're not spinning and we're not getting connected, I'm teaching. They're learning. But I really did it, Andrew, because sometimes I give everyone the clear transparency, and we'd share. I ordered a lot. I never ran out of bulbs. So thank you, Roseanne Hubbard, who worked in that department and kept me stocked on that. And so I would give a kid that, or we draw on it. And I had kids that couldn't sit still. So I made them stand up and move around, or when you turn over what they think is your authority, I never sat down when I teach. I always walked around, and, it wasn't for the fact that I had to be the leader. I wanted them to understand that I was the captain of that ship for that period. They could feel safe. I also didn't call my room a classroom. We were a community. Later on in teaching my career, I decided to do once a month, we form a circle and thank you, because it was the program you taught us about the 7
Habits.
the 7 Habits and the talking stick.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my family would have loved if I had a talking stick.
You always have no talking stick. It's
No.
constantly in your possession.
But basically, the talking stick, I would give it to the kids and we just bring up topics, things about, like when the cell phone first came in, and everyone's so uncomfortable with it. And so I brought in a shoe bag and with plastic and we put numbers on it. And I put it in the front of the room and I put my phone in it. And it was something these kids just stare at it like they really were fascinated, but they felt it's okay. There's my phone. If you ask me one thing I did to teach the special ed students and my whole population, everyone was coming up, I had to teach DNA replication. It's a hard topic. And I decided I happened to go, George wanted Burger King that night, and I gave in and I went and got him Burger King. And there's the crown sitting there. And I go to the girl, can I get one of those? And I think I only got it with like the kids' meal. I came up with this program called, it was like a story, King DNA and the Royal Ribosomes. I don't know. And I wrote it out. And what I did was the kids acted it out. Someone was the king. He has a wife, and he cannot. The DNA can't. For those of you, I'm sure you all know, can't leave the nucleus because it carries the message to the body. So the royal ribosomes have to come pick it up from the castle, and the wife, the queen, says you can't leave. You're going to ruin everything. And I modeled it first with students, and then they went on to do it, and it became one of the best things was that, or, I made sock puppets one year to teach it, and stories. Just, there was a lot of stories. So my funniest story, one of the things that I take away is I had a student bring me in a GPS. George and I had it in our cars, and he puts down the same thing I have in my car. I go, what's that? He goes, I want you to use it. I go, well, I have one in my car. Thank you. I go, in fact, the same one. He goes, no, in here. I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, like yesterday, you're talking about, I don't know what evolution. And all of a sudden you started to talk about your own appendix surgery, because I was saying how over time, at first it was a vestigial organ. Now we no longer use it. He goes, and then you told us how it happened in college and he goes, and then you look at us and go, well, where was I? The honest reaction, really, it meant a lot to me that they felt that they could do that. Yeah. With no disrespect, Andrew, nothing other than it was really a genuine type of thing. It was great.
Well, and they wanted to do it for you. They wanted to please you. They wanted to make you proud because of that relationship. Ilene, another thing you did, right? And it was just natural the way you were. You always found the best in people, right? You taught with a number of different co-teachers, right? Yeah. They were the best. That person, they were the best. Mike Dunleavy, he's like a Chinese buffet. He's got something for everybody, right?
But you remember that.
Why? Because you had little sayings about people, but you always found the best in your colleagues, in the families, in your students. How did you do that despite their challenges, despite the things that drove you crazy?
I think, I think in a way, when we meet people, and I think you and I had discussion before this was going on, our intention, this was something my mother used, our intention won't always be someone's perception. And I kind of looked at teaching that way. Like I could, tell a funny story. I could try and teach it this way. But I also, with my colleagues, what you see on the surface isn't always what's underneath. And I just love learning about people because it wasn't totally unselfish. It was selfish on my part. I like having people care about me. I like having friends. That's why I still feel that way when I pull in the parking lot. Because when you share that outside part or that part of yourself, then it lends itself, maybe somebody who wouldn't open up normally would. And I think I love talking about my family growing up, my parents, and then my family with my children and my husband. I love telling those. I told funny stories. I told very heart-wrenching ones that meant a lot to me. And I think when I did that, they saw me as someone that they could was real, that I was a person outside of that. I didn't shy away from embarrassing stories. I shared stories that were painful for me growing up, like as an adolescent, and
they can relate to those stuff. They related.
They related, but then they paid it forward.
Yeah.
I shared one time that I struggled with my weight in high school, and I also had acne, and I didn't get asked to go to prom, and I was talking about that with them, and those were painful things for me. And I think the fact that it wasn't so smooth, my adolescence, made me sensitive, and I'm grateful for those times. I'm grateful that I felt kind of awkward, and
the swimming in the swimming pool with Nancy
pool.
Dunn talking about the swimsuits.
I came from New York City, and they had these. You had to take a swimsuit, one size fits all. And I came from New York, and I was in Pine Bush, and please put on this one size bathing suit. And I went home and told my mother, and she's like, "Oh no, this isn't happening."
Oh, no.
But the reason I mentioned the prom was that the following June, I had a student, Raul Garcia.
She remembers the name.
Yeah, Raul Garcia, and we were at prom, and I was chaperoning, and he comes up and he says, "Can I have this dance?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Because now you could say you danced at prom." And he remembered it. And that was a year after I had him. And there's so many students. If I think of my first early memories, Rob Flores, Jared Kamar, who went on to be a teacher here, an administrator. And,
you were always at the prom. So whether you were invited, then you spent the night. But if you weren't invited, you still were there.
Well,
you were the greeting committee. You were the. Yeah.
I did. They had a cool Highland house. It wasn't right that far from my home.
Brought the lawn chair out front.
And
it was like a TV show.
Yes, and to watch, one of my greatest memories is having Corey Taylor came to prom that night, came out in the limos, the tux and everything.
Josh Klotz came.
And Josh came. Oh, Josh, yeah, I have that on video. He and I dancing.
Beautiful.
But I also got to meet families, parents, and not everyone came. There were blended families. There were children that were being raised by grandparents. I had one, a grandmother, Regine Westby's grandmother. She came to do a guidance meeting, and when it was all over, I go, "Is there any chance you can come to a PTA meeting or speak to our staff?" I said, because she was spot on. She took her to task. I mean, she reeled it in, and she supported us and
brought the food for Josh. Had brought pizza to the front of the school for a birthday party.
Yes. And the other thing that we had every year was Thanksgiving. So
I got invited many times.
You did that. We'd have Thanksgiving. To be honest, kids would sign up, and sometimes you knew that maybe, I don't know who's making the mashed potatoes. Is the stuffing going to be safe to eat? So, but I leaned in and I said, I'm just going to hope with the grace of God that this stuff is all safe. And George would either make, we'd have turkey one year, or take a vote, you want turkey or ham? And George, because I'm not really a cook. As I said, Duncan Hines. So my family jokes, I'm not leaving a cookbook, I'm leaving a pamphlet of 4 or 5 things that I made. But those, and I would invite people to come up. And I will tell you something, and maybe someone's thinking it out there that's listening. I didn't do any of it. It wasn't like pre-thought. It was just like I thought we're talking about Thanksgiving and they're not going anywhere, or they only have 3 people in their family. And ours is like we're falling out the door. I mean, people just want to be at a Valentine, Thanksgiving, or Christmas, and Easter. And, the home, Yvette's home, my daughter's home, how everyone just comes. And I wanted that for them too. And it did. And I've gotten invited to homes. I've been invited to graduation parties. But I will tell you that as I said in the beginning of this, I've gotten more than I gave. When you sent me, we met and we talked about this, having this happen. I will speak now, whether you want me to say it or not. You and I had a very close bond, and you would talk to me about things. I'd watch you as you were a principal, assistant principal, principal, and I watched you, and I would say, and I sensed there was something bigger in there, kind of like I felt about my kids, and I would bring it up, or you'd say something. And I always felt that there was that part of you that wasn't completely there. And I remember telling you about my favorite story, The Wizard of Oz. There's the scarecrow, a brain, the lion with courage, and of course the Tin Man with the heart. And the message that he meant for that, because I researched it, was that represents a human being, a total person. And I think we don't always have the courage to just go with our heart or use our brain. And when they all mesh together, and that's what you've done here, you have really, I'm beyond happy for you and proud of you that whatever it was, you took that step. And it wasn't probably, you have to have real tenacity and really see something that you want. And now that when you asked me to do this,
only a couple of years I've been asking it. So, it took a couple of years.
That flood, and now I went back to the middle school, and my first teaching memory is of Ed Chukrin, Mr. Ed Chukrin. And this was in 1983, and I have to teach a social studies class, and I didn't know what to do. And I walk in the room, and it's the second day, and he's sitting in the back of the room, and I have like 25 kids, and I'm like, I go, "Good morning, Mr. Chukrin." And he goes, "Well, good morning, Miss Greenberg." That was my maiden name. And he says, "What's this? I hear you're teaching social studies." I said, "Well, yes." And he goes, "Would you mind if I sat in?" I said, "No." And he wasn't there to observe me. He was there and he supported me. He sat in the back of the room and he went like this, and he went, "You got it." And that meant everything, because those teachers, the Ronnie Moyer, Judy Woolley, Keith Peters, Roy Ritalik, all those people, Betty Jane Polanis, these are people that meant something to me. I looked at them in awe. And I don't use that. I mean it. Like, they made it look so smooth and easy, and they were comfortable. And I wanted that. So I clung to those moments, and it meant so much to me and when he did that, it meant a lot, because it must have been that, and there were times he told me, "You got to stop. Don't smile so much. You wait a little bit. You're too happy in there." No. And Ron Moyer said that to me. He goes, you gotta, this isn't, a talk show, or this isn't, you gotta let them know who you are. Plus I was teaching 7th and 8th graders, and they're a whole different, squirrely, yeah. There's a whole different,
Ilene, I got to share. Even you telling the story about Mr. Chukrin, did you see how she used the different voices? Her voice, the elevated and short. The way she tells the story, it's magical. Ilene, we're running out of time. I know you and I could go all day, but I did want to, the retirement was a big deal for you. COVID was in there, but to actually say, "Hey, I'm gonna hang it up." And for all of us, including me, Ilene with the retirement and COVID, and I missed the party, and that still bothers me to this day. That I missed the party. She was the following year, and I wasn't there. But I know it was hard. You had lost your husband, you had lost your mom, and you weren't losing Port Jervis, but you were retiring. Talk to me about stepping away and adjusting your life there, and what it's meant for you at retirement here now. Is it 5 years?
5 years.
5 years. You look great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will tell you that evening I went home, and I told you this, it's funny. I went home and I hung up the dress I was wearing, which, by the way, I returned because I was totally emotional. Returned to Macy's the next day. I told you that you felt awful, but I
This
went.
This is the day of the retirement party? Is that the day?
It was the following day I
Okay.
returned the
Okay.
dress. I didn't
Okay.
want to look at it. I mean, talk about melodramatic. But that night I went into, and I now live alone, and everything is pretty much in the man cave the same. And my husband was a huge Mets fan, Jets fan, and in that room is the picture of my hello, my sweetheart.
There he is in his Mets.
And his brick right there. He's pointing to it.
Amazing.
Amazing man, amazing fan. Yes. So what happened was, in there is the picture of my students that I now have on the fridge, was the big one. And I went to that and I looked at it, and there weren't a lot of people at the retirement. There wasn't my department. There wasn't all that. There was Peggy Fitzgerald came, my sister, my brother-in-law, my son, Stephen. You were not there, yes. But I looked at that picture and I thought it was never about the adults for me. And I mean that. I went in that room and I was so grateful I brought myself in there. I think George sent me in there. And I looked at it and I thought, that's it. That's what it was about. And I go back to a student I had, Billy Klein, who was really struggling. And he just was so down on himself. And I leaned in, and he was taking the Regents exam. And I said to him, close your eyes and see yourself walking across the stage. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. That year, Annie Ward and I, my dear Annie, were senior advisors, and we're standing at the steps, and we tell them when to walk, and we just touch their shoulder, and he leans in and he says to me, Mrs. V, it's happening. I'm walking across the stage. I remembered that night of the retirement dinner. And I thought, that's the gift I get to carry with me. I do have a very good pension. Thank you, Port Jervis City School District. I make that joke with my children. I go, if I do something, I go, what do we say? Thank you, Port Jervis City School District. But seriously, I carry those with me. That never went, it's never going to go away. And if I had known then that this would be what it was, I can't even tell you, like, my relationships with the teachers and all the laughing and the kidding around. And Barb Hess and I did a CSI where I was a dead body on the ground. I wore this costume and the kids had to come over. I had an empty candy bag and I was murdered. And we were teaching about blood typing, and we decided to create this. And if I had known how great that moment would mean to me now, like, it's just, I couldn't be happier. But I think of my parents and all the stories they told me. And now I get to have that little piece of them, what I got to witness with them. I now get to share it with my children. And I go on and on. I tell my own kids stories. Tell my daughter, Jessica, I go, you got to hear them all, because, I don't want to, well, I hope I don't forget them, but I might. But I want them to know that part of me, and my grandchildren, and, that means so much to me. And
beautiful, beautiful. Ilene, education, the respect for educators, it's kind of changed here. There's less people going into education. What's your message about the gift of education for those thinking about it, for those doing it now? What would you say to those educators and those thinking about becoming an educator?
Well, I'd say think about the best teacher or teachers you ever had. There's got to be one or two. I had Mrs. Roebuck and Mr. Tice in high school. I remember them. Do I remember the actual lesson or the book I was reading with Mrs. Roebuck? No, I remember her. I remember how she looked. I remember how she knew us and how she involved us in the reading. I think if you want to make a difference in the world, it has to start with kids because they're going to be the future. And I think that there's so much more out there now, and now, Andrew, with social media and all of that. We just can't, we have to integrate into that. We have to bring it in and realize this is where they are now. Meet them where they are. And then I think, and here in Port Jervis, I was given the opportunity of, it's perfect. There's nothing else I could say. I cannot think of any time when I was disappointed. I can't. But I see it there. I was at the high school and I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it with teachers that were students that I knew that are working there, that like, Brian Roman is there, and I knew his father, George Roman. I mean, how great is that? John Wright, I knew John Wright because I worked with his father at ShopRite for years. I did. And so how is that I just feel that education, I think it's still there. I think that there's a lot, kids are getting messages through social media, and the kids are different. But we're different too.
Yeah.
You cannot ignore the fact that we like being on our phones too. Okay. And that's really acknowledge that. And, listen to kids. They know more. I have to tell you, they know more than we do, but it's not even that. Be willing to put on the lens that they're looking through because it's interesting. It's things, look, this is what's happening, the technology and all of it, but it's exciting. I had to go from a phone that was hooked to the wall with a 10-foot cord to now this. I had to adjust. And, I think back, I joke about it, but it's the truth. And I'm grateful every day. I'm grateful I met you. I'm grateful that Tony DeMarco brought you here. And, that's what it is. It's, yeah.
Ilene Valentin, friends, one of the best there ever was. Terrific teacher, terrific person. So nice to see so many of your students. We try to create what I call SEEs, SEEs, significant emotional experiences. You created so many of those for kids. You were present at so many of them. You look at the events, the prom, the graduation, the party, this, all while doing that for your family as well.
And for myself, Andrew.
Yeah.
I'd go home every night. I would feel good. Yeah. I did. And that's why I love teaching Arch. I taught night school. I loved it. Anthony Lazaro, our principal at the high school now, I taught with him in night school first. And now to see him there now too.
Doing really well.
Really, really, really
sharp,
well.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
Well, this was fun. I appreciate the red and black today, Ilene. Port Pride, we got you a little swag here.
Thank you.
And we're going to end with that, Ilene.
Okay.
Port Pride. You weren't from this community. I am not from this community, but they adopted us. They took us in. What does Port Pride mean to you?
Well, Andrew, when we think about the word pride, I take pride in something. It's really an I statement when you think about it, but it's not. We take pride in Port Jervis. We're a community. It's not an I. The pride, you feel it wherever you go. And what they've done here, from the time I used to go to Homer's to, it's true, you still feel it. And that's what it is. It's not an I feel pride, it's we feel pride. And it's and you weren't from here either, you can't help but get the bug. I mean, it just is. And I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Ilene Valentin. This is the Port Connects podcast. Ilene, certainly a great connection with us. So a shout out to your family. Thank you, Stephen. All your children.
Thank you.
Really, your mom, a special person. You've given so much. You must look back and feel. You're talking about pride. You feel proud of what you did, because you are admired, you are beloved.
Thank you.
And the memory lives on with your students and the legacy you did. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ilene Valentin, everybody. It's not often you get a hug after the show here. So friends, it is the bell game is Saturday. A big in Middletown. You must have a little, Middletown all these years,
I do know people that work there.
Yeah.
I went to Pine Bush, so go Bushmen. I was Pine Bush.
Yeah. Well, enjoy the weekend, everyone. It's been a beautiful fall, been a beautiful start to the school, and we appreciate it. We appreciate everyone jumping in the chat there. Ilene, we wish you good health and wellness, and thanks for staying connected to Port. She always shows the love with us on Port Jervis. So leave Ilene a comment in the chat there, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.
Ilene, how about a go Port?
Go Port!
Bam. See ya.